Well, it feels like 2025 was the real launch of James Gunn's new DCU with the release of Superman and Peacemaker Season 2. The actual true launch of the DCU came in 2024 with the 7-episode animated series Creature Commandos. Although Creature Commandos was supposed to be the launch of this new universe, the show greatly underperformed in viewership numbers, with its 2-episode premiere garnering 22 million minutes of watch time, according to Luminate. With both episodes' combined runtime adding up to about 52 minutes, that's roughly 423,000 viewers, assuming every viewer watched each episode all the way through. Now, Luminate doesn't account for every single viewer. Luminate is a software essentially that's on certain smart TVs, but because it has direct access to those specific TVs, it can be used to compare with direct numbers of other shows. To put that in perspective, The Penguin, which is also a TVMA DC project on HBO, garnered 5.3 million viewers, or roughly 374 million minutes watched in its 1-episode premiere. While there are many fans out there who love James Gunn's writing and directing, I'm someone who's been more in the camp that he's been essentially regressing with every project. Creature Commandos is something that should be right in James Gunn's wheelhouse. It's a ragtag team of criminals who don't get along, and has a main character that's rough around the edges and needs to discover how to become a true leader in order to get the ragtag team to work together. The other thing that should realistically make this a slam dunk for James Gunn is that it uses niche, weird characters, which James Gunn has been far better at directing. The main cast of Creature Commandos is Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr., Indira Varma as the Bride, Maria Baklova as Alana, Alan Tudyk as Dr. Phosphorus, Sean Gunn as both Weasel and G.I. Robot, Zoe Chow as Nina, and David Harbour as Frankenstein's monster, which this show just calls Frankenstein. So I'm just going to do that for simplicity, but it's Frankenstein's monster in normal media. Obviously, this will contain spoilers, but the show's been around for a year, so if it gets spoiled for you, I don't care. It's your fault. You shouldn't have stuck around. After the events of 2021's The Suicide Squad and 2022's Peacemaker Season 1, which are both somehow canon and not canon to the DCU, which is a whole other thing, but we're not going to worry about that for this video. Amanda Waller is no longer able to use humans for her Task Force X project. However, she's found her workaround. She's going to use non-humans, or in this case, monsters specifically. And then she requests Rick Flag Sr. to command Task Force M, also known as the Creature Commandos. Task Force M is made up of the Bride of Frankenstein, who has super strength, Weasel from the Suicide Squad, who is some sort of bipedal weasel who was locked up for allegedly killing 27 children, G.I. Robot, a World War II soldier robot that loves killing Nazis, Dr. Phosphorus, which is a skeleton surrounded by green radioactive flames, and finally Nina, which is a walking fish that wears a fishbowl on her head. The Creature Commandos are sent to the made-up country of Pakistan, which is inspired by your average Eastern European country. The Creature Commandos' assignment is to protect the Princess of Pakistan, Alana, from the militant group known as the Sons of the Mascara. They are led by an Amazonian who claims to be the heir of the Mascara, known as Circe. Upon arriving in Pakistan, Rick Flag Sr. begins to grow close with Alana, having to deal with the death of his son. It's hinted at throughout the first episode that the bride has some kind of connection to Pakistan, and it is then, of course, later revealed that she was created in Pakistan to be the bride of Frankenstein. Bride, through her creation, forms a relationship with her and Frankenstein's creator, Victor. This relationship between Bride and Victor leads to Frankenstein killing Victor out of jealousy. Essentially, it's revealed Frankenstein has been chasing Bride for centuries, fighting all throughout history, and now he's going to try to track her down in Pakistan as the Creature Commandos are here on assignment. Circe and the Sons of the Mascara manage to distract Task Force M and draw them away from the castle, using that opportunity to attack and attempt to kill the princess. In the ensuing battle, G.I. Robot is destroyed by Circe. Weasel and Dr. Phosphorus then manage to incapacitate Circe before she manages to kill the princess, which she very easily could have done, but that's a plot hole for later. The Creature Commandos return to the US with Circe in custody. It's then shown that Frankenstein is tracking Bride as she arrives in the US. But first, before all that, Circe uses her clairvoyance in order to show Amanda Waller that Princess Alana was actually going to lead the Pakistani army in World War III. This is confirmed to Amanda Waller by a professor known as Professor McPherson, who is an expert in the Amazonians and the Mascara itself. So in order to save the free world, Amanda Waller sends the Creature Commandos back to Pakistan to assassinate the princess. Flag, not wanting to kill Alana, who he grew close with, refuses to lead the commandos to Pakistan, so Bride is selected to be their new leader. On his way back home, however, Flag is attacked by Frankenstein, who was under the impression that Bride had some sort of crush on Rick Flag. After a conversation, Frankenstein and Rick Flag agree to help each other so that Flag can save Alana and Frankenstein can be with Bride. In order to do this, Frankenstein and Rick Flag go to investigate the professor, only to discover the real Professor McPherson has been murdered and that someone is taking her place as an imposter. Now, even though it's an imposter, we still managed to get quite possibly one of the most realistic depictions of a modern real-life professor in this animated show.
Because what about the lesbian?
Which it is revealed that Professor McPherson's place has been taken by Clayface. Flag, armed with the information that they were lied to about Circe, manages to call Alana and warn her. With this new information, the Pokolistani army attacks the Creature Commandos. The Commandos do manage to fight them off, but first Flag and Frankenstein got into a fight with Clayface, which left Rick Flag Sr. gravely injured. Frankenstein, however, not backing down, manages to defeat Clayface by grabbing some wires out of an outlet. Which, such an easy way of defeating a villain, I'm sure will not cause problems in any future projects whatsoever. Despite defeating the Pokolistani army, the Commandos are completely separated from one another and must navigate their way back towards the castle without being killed or captured. Frankenstein arrives in Pokolistan while Flag recovers in the hospital. Just as the Commandos arrive to the castle and group up, they spot on the surveillance footage that Princess Alana was actually meeting with Clayface just a few days before. It's at this point when Frankenstein catches up with the Commandos and Bride promptly shoots him, seemingly dead on the spot. Now, despite there being a very credible and known threat to the princess's life, she actively takes no precautions, claiming it to be some sort of show of strength for her country, I guess, even though she's completely alone. This is a kind of a stupid way of writing this as a way to essentially have her be in a position where she'd easily be attacked by the Commandos. And it doesn't make much sense in the context of the show, but either way, she goes for a swim in this lake at the very top of a mountain, so the Commandos send Nina in to kill her. Meanwhile, Amanda Waller and John Economos from Peacemaker decide to go check out Professor McPherson on a tip from the still recovering Rick Flag. They discover there that McPherson had been murdered and attempt to call the castle of Pokolistan in order to make the Creature Commandos stand down. However, the call arrives too late as Nina went up to stab Alana, but the knife was turned back on her and Nina was killed. Then, after a couple minutes, Bride goes to confront Alana, revealing that she knows the whole thing was a setup from the start. The original Professor McPherson that vouched for Circe was in fact credible. Alana, knowing this, sent Clayface to kill the professor and take her place in order to make Rick Flag believe that Professor McPherson had lied originally. Bride then kills her, saying it's not for the safety of the world or for the American government, but it's out of revenge for Alana killing Nina. Then, the three remaining Creature Commandos, being Bride, Weasel, and Dr. Phosphorus, walk off into the sunset. The final scene of Creature Commandos shows Bride walking into a new wing at the Bellerive Institute, revealing her new team. We see some familiar faces from throughout the show, as well as, of course, the still-alive Dr. Phosphorus and Weasel, as well as a rebuilt GI robot. And then we get a brief cameo from the legend himself, King Shark.
And deadly.
Does it talk?
Book read.
Wow.
So smart, me. Enjoy books so much.
Now, how is this show? Well, it's a bit of a mess. So at times, Creature Commando feels like a very fun monster show that you could watch around Halloween. And then at other times, most of the time, in fact, through the later episodes, it feels like a great example of classic bad character writing and inconsistencies in the script. Now, starting with the positives of this show, I quite like the animation style. It feels simple, yet complex at the same time. It's quite unique in the sense of how the action is shown, some of the way the lighting is done, and it never really feels like the animation is strictly lacking throughout each episode. Sort of hand in hand with the animation, the designs of the characters all look pretty great. Each monster looks very unique, as well as the characters we've seen in live action, like Rick Flag Sr. or Amanda Waller, look very good in the overdramatic kind of animation style you can get, where an animated character size might not be as proportionate as to what it would be in real life, but you can still clearly tell the character in the animation is the same character that was in live action. To go with the characters looking great, the voice acting is also amazing. Every character pretty much sounds unique, including Weasel and G.I. Robot, which is voiced is a strong word, Weasel doesn't speak English, but voiced by Sean Gunn in and of himself. Alan Tudyk also voices a few different characters, but you never really notice it. Every character still feels like their own separate character, and not just an actor playing two different parts. In true James Gunn fashion, the music is another highlight of this show, with lots of original songs that are creative and add a fun tone to the scenes they're in, as well as setting the pace for different action montages. They're all really fun, and they all fit the tune of Monsters or Halloween or whatever kind of feeling you're going for with that. Each of the original songs fit that very well. Finally, I really enjoy the pacing of each episode. Each episode being somewhere around the 25-minute mark helps with the flow of it. The episode doesn't drag out that much, and it's plenty of time for the show to properly develop an A plot and a B plot, which I will say Creature Commandos manages to, for the most part, do with every episode. It has an A plot that runs throughout the whole season, and a B plot that tends to run within one episode. It also has times where there's even C plots and further, making them even more complex than other projects that have been released recently. Efficient pacing is something James Gunn has really struggled with, I feel like, in his last two projects of Peacemaker Season 2 and Superman. It's great to see that just 3 projects ago, he was still doing this pacing very well, and hopefully, for my sake, that will return in his future projects as well. Now, before I complain about elements of the show, if you're the kind of person who's going to say, it's just an animated show, don't take it too seriously, it's just superheroes, man, why do you care so much? This is not your kind of video. I choose to interact with this media how I choose to, which is to look at it from a critical angle. I already said what I like about it. Now I'm going to get into what I dislike. One of the main things each episode did, along with pushing the main plot forward, was giving backstory on a different Creature Commando with each episode. Initially, I quite liked this concept, but my opinion rapidly shifted when I saw how it began to lead to the narrative falling apart, as well as some of the characters falling apart. The thing that's interesting or compelling, at least I guess in my opinion, about the Suicide Squad as a concept, is that it's about putting evil villains up against their natures to try to save the world. The characters do this out of their own selfishness or self-preservation, often for exchange of time off their sentences or so that they're not killed by Waller. But eventually throughout the story, we can see them change and grow into having a more heroic quality while still not being heroes themselves, like in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. My main issue with a lot of the backstory that's provided throughout the show, it either absolves them of the crime that got them locked up in the first place, or they wouldn't even be in a prison in any sense, which overall kind of destroys the concept of these are evil people who have to go against their nature, and instead it's just these are wrongfully convicted or whatever, and now they're being forced to do heroic things against their will, but they're going to do it because they're not evil people in the sense. The only 2 characters, really, through their backstory or what's said about them in the show, that are where they belong are Dr. Phosphorus and Bride. Bride's backstory doesn't really hint as to why she's in prison, but she tells Nina at one point in the episodes that she's killed many people, so seemingly would get locked up for the murder of innocent people. Dr. Phosphorus, on the other hand, is shown to have a tragic backstory involving his wife and kids. However, after he got revenge, he continued and formed a criminal empire before he was taken down by Batman and arrested. Now, the other 3 characters as a concept don't make any sense. Starting with Nina, it's kind of shown that she was just arrested because the people of Star City thought that she was a sea monster, despite the fact that Nina, as a child who still looked exactly like this quote-unquote sea monster they're seeing now, went to schools with other students, seemingly who also had parents, and Nina had only been gone for 3 years. I don't think that she would be completely forgotten about in that time, let alone dragged off to Belle Reve prison for a life sentence for being a sea monster. We also get a really weird moment in her flashback where Dad's just shot because why not? He wasn't acting violently or anything that would actually cause a normal police officer operating under normal circumstances to shoot a man, but they did it anyway because she needed to have a tragic backstory.
Never a burden.
Step back now!
You were the greatest gift.
What?
So she's not really guilty of a crime and would probably not be in prison, especially considering the fact that she would definitely have a trial, seeing as how she actually speaks some form of spoken language, because we get told throughout the episodes that Weasel got a trial, and Weasel is essentially a stray animal. So if Weasel got a trial, I would assume Nina got a trial as well, but hey, maybe she hadn't stood trial yet, in which case I would think that she would not be selected for Task Force M, because that's tended to be a thing that applied to the old Suicide Squads. Also, not to mention, Nina is a U.S. citizen by birth, so regardless of whether or not, you know, they arrested her under the guise of her being a sea monster, there are medical records and other stuff proving that she exists as a human being who is a U.S. citizen by birth. So she would not be held in prison, especially not in this world of gods and monsters, which is obviously what James Gunn has titled Chapter 1 of the DCU, but does seemingly apply. There are lots of monstrous creatures or monsters or gods who walk the earth freely and aren't just arrested for the sake of existing, so it doesn't really make any sense that Nina would have been arrested in the first place, let alone selected for the Suicide Squad, considering she has no discernible talents of murder or anything else that Waller would specifically want for that team. Weasel, in his backstory, it is shown that he did not kill or eat any children. In fact, he was trying to save the children from a burning building. For whatever reason, the police show up as Weasel is trying to drag one of the children out of the building and just begin shooting at Weasel, like not worried about the child at all. And then once Weasel drops the child, the police officers continue to try to shoot Weasel and then subsequently arrest the animal Weasel that looks just like an animal and not save the child, who they could clearly get to at this point, and just let the child die. So many questions about the police work in these flashbacks. It's worth noting, based off every description the police would even have too, they would probably assume Weasel's a rabid dog or a wolf of some kind. They would not be going with the intent to arrest said dog or wolf. They would probably just either send animal control, which is what you tend to do with an animal. It's called animal control, not the police.
That went so much better than anyone could have hoped for.
And once again, they arrest him, despite the only thing that's even like somewhat discernible about Weasel being human is that he sometimes stands on two legs. I say sometimes because there are plenty of times he walks on all four legs throughout this show. If the people of the town thought Weasel truly killed 27 children or whatever, Weasel would not be arrested and sent to trial. He would be treated like a psycho animal that murders 27 children in real life would. He would be euthanized, most likely. He is an animal who speaks no form of spoken language and sometimes stands on two legs. I mean, just to point out how stupid that would be like putting a kangaroo or a bear on trial, because sometimes bears stand up on two legs and kangaroos obviously hop around on two legs. That'd be like putting a kangaroo on trial for the murder of 27 children. I would tend to think that probably wouldn't happen, but in this show it does for some reason. And this is not like King Shark or even Gorilla Grodd, because in some form those creatures speak a spoken language. Obviously Nanaue does not speak in a very normal fashion.
Peacemaker.
Put it against the wall.
But he still speaks in some way, and most sharks don't have legs, so that also points to him being a little bit more than just a normal shark. Gorilla Grodd obviously speaks a language as well, meaning that they have some reasonableness to actually, I guess, be arrested or imprisoned instead of euthanized like a wild animal that murdered children. On top of that, personally, I would have preferred if Weasel was just this psycho murderer that, like, was just arrested and not, like, falsely imprisoned as an animal or some kind. I think that's kind of way funnier for how he was in the Suicide Squad movie, to have him just drown immediately being a psycho murderer, but that's obviously more of a personal preference thing. I think that would have just been a funnier story. A similar thing to that applies to G.I. Robot as a whole. G.I. is essentially arrested for killing neo-Nazis in a neo-Nazi rally. He stands up and executes all of them. There was, again, no real reason G.I. Robot would be put in prison. You know, he's a robot. It'd be like our Mr. Terrific's T-Sphere's gonna get locked up for aiding a federal fugitive known as Superman. Are they gonna lock up the T-Spheres for that? You know, I don't think robots tend to go to prison. They tend to just get turned off. I don't think robots tend to go to jail, but hey, that's just me, I guess. And on top of that, I don't really think G.I. needed as much of a backstory as they gave him. He was a robot that killed Nazis in World War II. It was funny enough as a concept. The character and some of the present moments with how he interacted were funny as well. I didn't think he needed that much characterization before he was killed in one of the episodes. Now, getting off of the characters and into some of the problems with the plot that I have, I think that the entire side plot of Frankenstein and Bride is just a complete waste of time. I guess that's kind of the joke half the time. There is so much time spent in the first 6 episodes setting up this conflict between Frankenstein and Bride just for her to shoot him, and that's it. You never even see him again. And it's not even like shoot him after a full conflict. It's like he shows up, she shoots him, and then they leave his dead body there, and you never see him again. On top of that, this is just another example of like incels being used as the villain of whatever. And, you know, whether it's in The Batman or The Boys or Doctor Who, it's something that has become pretty tired and played out at this point. It's a joke that sometimes, I guess, can land if it's done efficiently and not drawn out as a major side plot through multiple episodes like it is in this show, where it's just a joke that doesn't land because he's dead, and then you're just like, why did I waste all this time with Frankenstein's character? There's episode 6 has entire backstory for Frankenstein that does not matter. None of it matters in any sense of the show. Everything with Frankenstein is useless outside of him preventing Flag from being killed by Clayface. Rick Flag Sr., who is supposed to be this grizzled war veteran responsible enough to lead Task Force M, is essentially just a horny idiot. Basically, he dooms the whole world because he thought Alana was hot. You know, he wouldn't have gone to investigate Professor McPherson had he not thought Alana was hot, which is a very weak plot point, that the entire plan of Alana not being killed by the commando and the government would fall for her plan was that Flag really enjoyed having sex in a bathroom with her. That's the entire hinge of her plan, and it works.
All right, then.
Amanda Waller, on top of that, who is a character who has in the past been very clever and cunning, is always 3 steps ahead, is just a completely different person in this show. She constantly walks into traps or falls for things and never has a backup plan. She doesn't think twice about anything, and also got rid of a lot of fail-safes and safeguards that greatly helped her cause with Task Force X in the past that are seemingly no longer in place now. The reason Amanda Waller even uses criminals and murderers for Task Force M or X or whatever is because she can completely control them. In past versions is by using a bomb in their head. In this version, they use a taser. So on top of her being able to completely control them, in hand in that, they are fully expendable. Waller will detonate the bomb in their head without any hesitation. We saw this in the opening of the Suicide Squad, and it's a very compelling way to get these criminals to do as she wishes in this sense. So realistically, in the show, the moment Waller finds out Clayface was actually impersonating Professor McPherson, now believing Alana was fully innocent, she should immediately either detonate the bombs in their head or tase them in the context of this show, because they are expendable. She would feel no guilt for doing this, and at least in the past, she wouldn't. And she's always had a way to do that manually from where she is. In this show, shown to just be a iPhone that Flag has. However, Flag does state that Waller has a backup reason for that. Obviously, in the past, we've seen monitoring rooms, and it's a briefcase she walks around with that detonates the bomb. Whatever. Either way, that should have been what she did immediately, because she would have had no guarantee the commandos could receive her message of calling off the assassination plot, and the safest way to avoid a global war would be to kill these criminals that she fully sees as expendable. Instead, she gets completely lucky that Princess Alana manages to turn the knife back on Nina and kill her. Obviously, luck in the sense that she thinks Alana is now innocent, which at the time she had the evidence to believe due to Clayface. On top of that, the idea that she would even use electricity to control the monsters in the first place doesn't make any sense. We see with how Frankenstein takes out Clayface that the shock doesn't hurt him. It doesn't stop him in any way. It completely obliterates Clayface, and Frankenstein is fine with it. Meaning, it wouldn't be that hard to assume that Bride also likely is not affected by electricity. Now, it's shown that she is affected by this taser, but that seems to just be a plot point. That's just a misstep in the writing. It was overlooked or something. She was created with electricity as well. At the same time, somehow it affects her, and this electricity in the house doesn't affect Frankenstein, and it doesn't make much sense, is what I'm saying here. I think the bomb had shown no problems of actually causing an issue. Obviously, in the Suicide Squad, that she didn't manage to blow it up because she was attacked by the members of Argus who wanted to help Task Force X fight Starro. But there's no reason I feel like that she would actively go away from the effective method of coercion being the bomb. There are also two different points in this show that Flag himself should be very dead. The first comes in episode 1 when Dr. Phosphorus is fighting with him for the control of the shock remote. It's pretty clear Dr. Phosphorus has no moral qualm with killing Rick Flag straight up to take this remote. It's implied that he was trying to kill him, in fact, through multiple points in the show. And it's shown later in the show that literally just by touching guys, he can murder them and burn through their face. Yet at one point, he grabs Flag's wrist and just lightly burns him in no permanent way, meaning he was just being very nice and was like, I'll just make it hurt a little bit, but it's not going to matter that bad. So Flag very much should have at least lost both his hands in that fight. Probably should have been murdered. And then again with Clayface definitely could have killed him. However, he just broke his back, Bane style, before he was taken out by Frankenstein. So, maybe we'll say he only should have been dead once, but Clayface realistically could have killed him. On top of that, I already talked about Alana seemingly taking no credibility in the threat to her life that was very credible and very much a problem, and her reasoning for why was stupid and didn't make any sense. Those are the main flaws that I noticed with the show. There are a few smaller ones riddled throughout all the episodes. A lot of the backstory stuff I didn't touch on. Some of it's weird, not to mention all the weird cuck stuff in the writing. There's a full cuck thing in episode 2. This seems to be something James Gunn is quite fond of, with Peacemaker Season 2 being considered here. But, it's just kind of weird. It's not like a writing plot hole. It's just, I think it's a little weird when it happens. I personally have no problems with this new DCU using animation as a medium to tell stories. However, I think it shouldn't be held on the same level as a movie or a show. I think in a perfect world, a movie holds the most weight. Anyone should be able to walk into a movie and have some semblance of what's going on, not having to be subscribed to HBO Max to know what happened in episode 5 of Peacemaker Season 2, to know what's going on in this movie that they're watching, because that's not good business. That's a great way to lose a large portion of audience. I think movies should somewhat stand alone and build to a coherent narrative, very MCU Phase 1 through 3 like. Shows can add to the characters and world building. I think like what Peacemaker Season 1 did, where they can be important, they can help you appreciate the movies more, but they aren't necessarily required. They're more just for the diehard fans. And then a tier lower should be the animation, which really I don't personally think should have much effect with movies at all. It should be used as world building, as fun stories that you're not going to spend the big budget on to do live action, but are still a fun concept. Creature Commandos fits into this. I think it does tie a little bit too much into Peacemaker and even Superman with some of the Rick Flag Sr. stuff. But I really think the problem comes with launching your universe with a TVMA animated show. That's such a niche audience. A lot of adults aren't going to watch animation, and then kids can't watch it because it's rated highly. There's nudity, there's sex, there's language, there's whatever.
Wait! Kids, ask your parents where babies come from!
This is a very niche, 16 to 28 audience, and then, older people who are going to watch the animation or are diehard DCU fans will watch it. That in and of itself is kind of the more issue I have with how this animation was done. I also think it's not the greatest idea to launch your DC universe with a weird Suicide Squad spinoff. I think a Superman movie would have been the best way, followed by Batman, Wonder Woman, whatever. Not an animated show that's a Suicide Squad spinoff. As seen with these viewer numbers, animated shows are going to perform worse than your live action shows, which are going to perform worse than your movies. That should play into your hierarchy, as well as money making. Movies are going to make you the most money. Animations will maybe lose you the least amount of money, when it comes to losing the money, but movies are the only one with a direct box office where you can earn money that's not just paying yourself through streaming. But at the end of the day, what do I know? I'm just a guy who watches stuff for fun and yaps about it. So that's the whole dealio with DC's forgotten project, Creature Commandos. Is it forgotten for a good reason, or is it a writing masterpiece that should be viewed by everyone? I think you know my opinion, but I'll say, if you're a James Gunn bro who loves everything James Gunn has ever made and you think everyone is stupid if they don't like it and you think I'm an idiot, you'll probably love this show because it's the same exact story as every other James Gunn project. You know, the ragtag team, that whole thing. On top of that, you know, maybe there's some world building here. So if you're going to be real into this new DCU, you probably want to watch it. But if you're someone who's on the fence about new superhero projects, or think there's too many of them, or you think the stories suck, whatever, you actually care about stories having internal consistency and characters making sense, and you don't just want to laugh at fun, haha, potty humor, whatever, I would not recommend this show to you. I don't think it's necessarily awful. I don't think it's tragically bad. Like I said, I think it can be a fun Halloween monster story. It's whatever. You know, that's the perfect way to describe it, and that's exactly how a show gets forgotten. Thanks for watching.